Okay, now moving on to looking at Durkheim's work in a little more detail, and looking at the conclusions he came from that multivariate analysis, the frequency thing, and his categories and reasons why suicide takes place at different rates in different places. He defined one form of suicide, egoistic suicide, i.e. that looks to the individual for its motivations. What I mean by that is in societies such as Britain and other Protestant countries in Northern Europe, and Northwest Europe, it's the social responsibility is given to the individual. So you're responsible for the decisions you make and for the benefits, the results, but also the consequences that happen. So in an individualistic society, if an individual makes the wrong mistakes, takes the wrong path, it is almost acceptable that suicide is a choice for them to deal with that situation. This is the idea of egoistic suicide. Conversely, in societies where the collective rather than the individual, where the group rather than the person are emphasized, where fulfillment, if you like, does not come from self, but neither does responsibility. It is contribution to the group, to the whole, that is most important. These societies are altruistic, they're interested in helping others, and there is far more of a collective feel. Durkheim says that suicide rates are less where these instances occur. So here we are, Durkheim, French geezer, saying the reason why the French don't commit suicide is because we have greater bonds to our national society, to our culture, than they do over there across the channel in Britain. However, he did say there was a negative side to this. In societies or groups or cultures where there is an incredibly strong definition of identity with, this can also lead to suicide. Kamikaze pilots in the Second World War famously gave their lives. They went on suicide missions and flew their planes into American ships. Suicide bombers today. It is said from this kind of analysis, although Durkheim wasn't around at the time, that it's this over-integration, it's over-identity, if you like, with the larger group that leads to acts of self-sacrifice and purely altruistic, i.e. community-based suicide comes as a result. One of Durkheim's key findings was this idea of anomic suicide, or anomie, as he calls it. Now, what he sees, and remember Durkheim as a functionalist was very focused on stability. He lived in a time in Europe where there had revolutions had caused convulsions in social life. He also lived in a time in Europe where the Industrial Revolution was changing the way people lived in a very rapid and seemingly uncontrolled way. What he said, where this happens, where there is a breakdown, if you like, through rapid social change or rapid economic change of the norms, values, status, and roles that guide us, that individuals become less integrated into the society as a whole. The social cohesion of that society breaks down, and that there is a sense of alienation, or what's the point, or not buying into what's going on, that leads to suicide. So a lack of bonds to society leads to suicide in this state. Fatalistic suicide, he suggests, happens in authoritarian or dictatorships. This is where a society or culture is so rigid and so strong and so dictated to the individual that there is only one way out, and that way out is to take your own life. Slavery, the experience of slaves being taken across the Atlantic in the Great Atlantic Slave Trade, wasn't that great for them, was that there were many suicides amongst the slaves. Rather than live in that kind of environment and live their life as a slave, they chose the way out, which was suicide. Prisons, there is a high incidence even of suicide, and this can be explained in the same way. However, there are internal criticisms to how Durkheim's work was put together. This idea and his of social integration is not measured. The word operationalize, if you operationalize a concept, it means you open up that idea or concept for testing or verification. As it says on screen here, it's about to operationalize something is to implement, apply, administer, put through. So what the main criticism of him is that he doesn't come to a clear definition of what integration, social integration means, or how it looks, or how it might be measured. It is a failed science in that sense, because his main claim, and the point of the scientific method is to verify or discredit a hypothesis or a claim. And here, Durkheim's claim was that a lack of social integration, a lack of bonds with the culture in a society leads to suicide. That in a more individualistic society, suicide is therefore more prevalent. And this would also explain why a married or unmarried person would have different rates of suicide attached to their status. So if you're married, you're more bonded. If you're unmarried, you're less integrated into society. So these concepts weren't verified during his research. There is no evidence or data given to look at these. So in that sense, it is claimed that it is failed science. It is questionable in terms of also the official statistics used by Durkheim. In Catholic countries, this has been proved of Ireland as well as France, because there is such social stigma or greater social stigma attached to the act of suicide. It is a sin in all countries, but it's obviously more of a sin in some rather than others. The suggestion is that rather than a coroner find that a case is suicide, they would be reluctant to do so because of this stigma. Maybe that coroner knows the family. Maybe that individual is someone of high status and standing. Maybe. So what it suggests is coroners' reports are not reliable sources of information.